Well, hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We had a little technical difficulties, but would it be a virtual meeting without one or two or five? It's all good. Shout out to the SAM staff for figuring this out in the past 30 minutes and creating us new links and all kinds of stuff. So thank you for your help. And I know that this has been a stressful experience for all of you as well, but thank you. So welcome to our didactic. This is an AWAEM and Faculty Development Committee co-sponsored didactic entitled Where Did My Boundaries Go? We have four great speakers because I have to shout us out from four institutions, mostly on the East Coast. So I'm Cassandra Bradby. I'm from East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina. Dr. Leah Bright is from Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Katya Goldflam is from Yale University, and Dr. Rebecca Merrill is from Cleveland Clinic, Akron General, as well as Neomed. And we're excited to share our experiences with our boundaries this year during our pandemic with you guys. So the outline for our talk is that first we're going to talk about how does Zoom break us down? And let's be real, break down our barriers as well. Is it just me? Or is it everybody else too? I'm pretty sure that we have all figured out that it is not just us, it is definitely everybody. Coincidentally, Zoom fatigue definitely has a bit more of an effect on women, and we're still working on studying that, but guess what? This is a new place for people to try and look into doing some research and getting some more publications out there, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we will also talk about how we can break this trend of Zoom fatigue and the obliteration of our boundaries in the past year. So Zoom fatigue, what is it? Coincidentally, think about it like this. We went from having very few meetings virtually to pretty much all of our meetings virtually in the past year. So Zoom as an entity went from 10 million daily users to 200 million daily users in a 3-month time period at the beginning of the pandemic. Surprise, but not really. The whole constant gaze is tiring. You have to focus more. You have to think more about people's nonverbal cues because now we're not in the same room anymore. So communication is even more exhausting because you're always working to figure out, well, what is so really saying? Or did I read that wrong? Or worse, they put stuff in the chat and then you have no concept of actually what their tone is with that one. Multitasking is making all of this more difficult. We are expected to be on at home, on at work, on for school, and everything in between. If you think about it from the standpoint of when we're in the ED seeing patients, we're busy trying to write a note and a resident is talking to us and giving to us a presentation and the care partner comes by and is like, hey, can you read this EKG? All at the same time. And let's be real, what happened to that note? Ain't no words in that note. That note is blank because we could not possibly type our note and listen to somebody else and read an EKG. The same thing is happening with Zoom. And on top of that, it now feels like we're having more meetings than we ever did before. We went from having my department in particular, we went from having faculty meeting once a month to now we have faculty meeting every Friday with excuses for holidays. But just to try to keep on top of all the things that are going on in the department because we're not seeing each other in the office the way we used to. So the CEO of Citigroup, Ms. Jane Fraser, actually banned Friday Zoom calls because she's trying to combat COVID burnout amongst her staff. She says that the blurring of the lines between home and work and the relentlessness of the pandemic workday have taken a toll on everyone's well-being. And it's just simply not sustainable. So since a return to any kind of normal, it looks like it's probably not coming for another many months at this point. She decided that she needed to take it into her own hands to try to reset some of our working practices. So if you work for Citigroup, she has banned internal video calls on Fridays. She's encouraged her staff to take vacation. They do allow communication on Fridays, but your video will not be on for that communication, and they try not to have outside calls during that time either. I think that's fabulous. I think we should all start thinking about how we can have Zoom-free day at least once a week. So Zoom fatigue. Let's be real, this is going to be with us for the next several years. And of course, someone has already written a paper about this. It is currently in review, but National Geographic picked it up in April of this year. And so they actually are looking at creating a measuring tool that they're calling Zoom exhaustion and fatigue scale. Sounds appropriate. They noticed that people are spending more time on video calls with less transition time between each call, which is definitely leading to a lot of Zoom fatigue. Women reported experiencing 13.8% more Zoom fatigue than men on average. Women spent more time per day in meetings with shorter breaks between them and felt more trapped by their video calls. These are the two strongest predictors of high Zoom fatigue. In addition to that, women also have noted more mirror anxiety than men have. They did note that there are some positives to Zoom. So no commute, flexibility to handle your household tasks, like you could be in a meeting and putting your laundry in the dryer at the same time. You have easy access to conferences for all workers, including those with disabilities. And so that's actually been trending a lot on social media recently. So we're hoping to keep some of these positive aspects while maybe getting rid of some of these more negative aspects. Virtual platforms are helpful tools, but can also add to our stress. And so we've already discussed that a little bit, but I think what we really need to work towards, as this article stated, is that we need to start thinking more about our boundaries, and that it's okay to decline a Zoom call at 9 p.m. But let's be real, if you were in the office, you would never be expected to take that call in the first place. So how can we try to use this technology to our benefit as opposed to worsening our mental health? And as all of you know, at this point, all things lead to Zoom. Residency didactics, medical school didactics, you're homeschooling your kid who's also on Zoom, in addition to national meetings like here we are today.
So how does it break our barriers? I think first of all, more likely to meet after hours. Goodbye 9 to 5 office days. And we're at home, which is great, but mildly awkward in your own home. And no, I'm not in my PJs or wearing my slippers right now. And it can be hard to separate your home from your home, literally and figuratively. I don't know, I think I'm working, but my family's not always sure that I'm working, or they see me sitting here and they still want to have a conversation with me. My mother wanders by and opens the refrigerator during a meeting. So you never know what's going to happen. So these are some comments that we've had about blurring of our boundaries. My chair has gotten used to, children during meetings. I think that's actually a positive, just a reminder that I am a mother and I, have other priorities sometimes. It's hard for my family to know when I'm working and I am not. Always as I'm sitting here looking at the computer and someone comes in the room and says, "Are you in a meeting? What are you doing?" And I get to spend far more time at home with my family. That's good. But am I really spending time with my family, or am I spending more time on Zoom when my family is in the background? And being home makes me think I have flexibility. I think I have flexibility. Do I have flexibility? I actually don't know. Or is this actually an invasion of my private space? So we also have some additional challenges of working from home. We have a loss of our structured workday. And we kind of already went having your roommate, your partners, your kids at home, no snow days. So when snow comes in and the university closes, I'm still going to work. And the expectation of availability, short term, long term, can you get on a call real quickly? And the ease of Zoom seemed to spiral into more and ever more meetings. And then this is just an example. Presentation of our presentation schedule at national conferences. Now, we understand we're a big country and the challenges of the time zones are no joke, but all of us over here on the East Coast, we're, East Coast people, it's dinner on a Zoom. Everything's in the evenings, coming into dinner time, family time. I have presentations at 6 p.m. I have presentations at 7 p.m. This will be interesting. We might have to get the toddler out of the house. And then committee meetings at 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. So we decided to actually find out, is it just me? Am I the high maintenance Zoom person and everyone else thinks it's cool? So we decided to send a survey to, all of our closest friends, AWAEM, CORD, and we got a surprising 264 responses. 45% age 31 to 40, 33% were age 41 to 50. 65% were women, not surprising, 33% were male, and 2% were non-binary or had no answer. And we decided to ask these questions that focused on the following: scheduling of meetings, social pressures, and the impact of virtual meetings and your preferences for when you get to have them. So our first questions: has your meetings increased in frequency? You can't see, the top bar is strongly agree. The second bar is somewhat agree. So I think the majority of people think that we agree that we have increased meetings, increased frequency of meetings. So why is that? Is it because we're not in the office and we can't have a quick chat resolution of things that come up in real time around each other, and you're able to, address things that are happening? You actually have to call a meeting every time something happens. And these are some of the comments we had that people just were happy to volunteer. So many meetings. I try to have a no meeting day. I'm trying to work on that still. I'm able to attend many more. That's great. Is that good? I've gotten to a level of craziness, and we're always fitting something in because it's easier. Meetings are scheduled on shorter notice. This is also true. We have strongly agree and somewhat agree. So not a lot of time before we get a notice that the meetings are coming. And is it just because it's easier? Well, we know you're home. We checked your clinical schedule and you're around. And, we think that, we're all meeting. And I'm starting to wonder if people are like stalking me and getting a little paranoid. They're like, well, you don't work till 3 today. Can you come on to a meeting? And I'm like, I still have to work 9 hours. And I guess that goes along with meetings are scheduled outside regular hours. So again, shift days are now open for meetings. And more often than not, they're coming outside of our office days. So office days used to be when we had meetings, and now all days are open if you're available to have a meeting. And as you can see, people tend to agree with us, strongly agree and somewhat agree. And then there's someone who somewhat disagrees, but I'm not sure who they are. And I'm likely to interrupt sleep for meetings. So we've actually found an uptick in strongly agree and somewhat agree that people felt that they are expected to be available in between night shifts, be available post night shift, be available before a night shift. And, everyone has like their own napping habits. Like, we all have like the way we address our night shifts and how we're going to mentally prepare for them. And those are being interrupted. So again, some of the comments we've gotten is more virtual meetings outside of regular hours with greater expectation that I'm available. I hate it when it makes me feel like meetings can happen anytime and I'm expected to be there. More likely to schedule evening meetings. Time at home is not protected, and people just seem to be respectful versus meeting at 8 and 9 p.m. And I guess it's just a change in the expectation of availability of when we can be present. And again, people saying, well, your schedule's not till, you're not on shift till 3. It was like, yes, but I still am not home until midnight. So it's a rough kind of world to kind of in place to navigate right now. So came across this when we were doing some research. What is everyone's policy on non-urgent Zoom meetings while on vacation? RSVP couldn't have come, but you know what? You're on vacation. If you've got Wi-Fi, we expect you to be there. This was a female orthopedic surgeon. So what is the expectations with Zoom?
So this was sort of the second half of our questions, kind of what are the pressures that people are feeling in terms of Zoom meetings. And just like Leah said, from this orthopedic physician who felt the pressure to be on Zoom in the middle of vacation. Thankfully, I have not had that experience, but certainly I think all of us feel this increased pressure of being available during what used to be off hours. And so higher expectations to be available. Most people agree or strongly disagree. And why is this? It's, again, just like we said, it's sort of this thought that it used to be that there was a barrier, right? Like you had to come into the office, you would say, I won't be in the office that day, and people kind of respect that. Whereas now the flip side saying, well, I'm not at home, most people know that that's not true because you probably are at home because there's nowhere else to go. And but also it's a lot easier to say something about I'm doing something rather than just I'm not available, right? I think we all have this barrier of saying no to things. And so to say that I just can't make it for no clear explanation is a little bit more challenging. And having to explain why you don't want to or you can't meet is, again, sort of a breaking down of that barrier, where it used to be pretty straightforward to just say, I won't be in the office that day, I'm post-call, I'm post-shift or whatever. Now I think it's a lot more challenging. And like you said, people know when you're on shift, we all have access to each other's calendars. And so it's a lot easier sort of to tell when that happens. And so the thought is that, well, if you're not in the office, you must be at home. And if you're at home, you're probably just sitting around. So why not? Let's just have a couple more meetings, again, because it's such a low threshold to just set up another Zoom. So in terms of everybody feeling the pressure, again, we asked the question, have you felt the pressure to accept meetings that interfere with your personal time? And the way we defined it was anything essentially kids time, home time, personal time, anything, it doesn't have to be someone with a family necessarily, but you have certain days of the week or whatever that you've designated as your time where you want to exercise, or you have the day off, you've worked the weekend. Obviously, all of us in emergency medicine are very used to the dynamic schedule. Working a weekend, maybe you'll take a weekday off, at least in theory. We'd like to think that hopefully everybody does that to substitute for a weekend. Mostly we probably just end up working anyway. But nonetheless, to have someone actually say, can you meet? Again, it's a lot harder to sort of say no to that when people know that you're not clinically working and it's a weekday. So the declining meetings, it is obviously something that we do. And hopefully we have sort of the comfort level to do that with our co-faculty members. It looks like based on this question that people do actually feel that it is not frowned upon. So they do feel comfortable saying no, and that when they say no, that's sort of respected. Again, hopefully because we're all part of the same EM culture, we know that everybody's schedules vary. And so people do feel comfortable saying no. They don't feel like they're sort of saying or doing something bad that their career will negatively be affected by saying no. But I think it's sort of a step in the right direction to make sure that people are aware of all of us are, it's okay to say no, and we accept that, and we sort of expect that, and to have that open dialogue, which I think sometimes is missing. So it's good to see that in general, it seems like people feel like they do have that ability to say no. And kind of the big, obvious question is how many people actually do dislike meetings outside regular hours? I think because we are so flexible in our schedules, it is sometimes, we all get emails from people, from colleagues at 3 a.m, and that may be the time that they have where they would rather do it at 3 a.m. after they've just finished a shift and then have time the next day to do something fun during sunlight hours. So people obviously have different preferences. It looks like overall the preference certainly is that people dislike meetings during off hours, during outside business hours. But I think, again, if you see this and you're the person in charge of scheduling a meeting, or you're sort of the senior member of a group or a department, I think recognizing that people do have these limitations means that you should also take charge of that and say, look, we understand that, we understand everybody's sort of a little bit different, and make sure that your team feels comfortable sort of declining stuff or just not doing that in the first place. I think there's no issue in asking, and maybe everybody wants to meet at 9 p.m., but obviously the expectation should not be that everyone's going to stay up and meet at 9 p.m. or 3 a.m. or whatever may be normal EM hours for some people. So again, we're all obviously people that really, I think, enjoy, one of the best things I think about emergency medicine is the flexibility, and Zoom provides us sort of an additional level of flexibility. And so there's certainly an upside, right? I think we've all recognized this in terms of being able to multitask, getting laundry done, you're home when stuff gets delivered, you can wear your PJs, like maybe I am, maybe I'm not wearing PJs down below. Obviously, Leah says she's not, I don't know. Do we really know? We don't. So, maybe you shower, maybe you don't. It's not the end of the world if you didn't shower for 3 days, because on Zoom, people can't smell you, right? And even if you go to work, people are wearing masks. So childcare, homeschooling, all of these things are things where it has provided us the flexibility to do this. Again, a little bit of that may be more of an illusion than true flexibility, because you think you have sort of all this extra time, but it is obviously getting crammed full with other stuff. But whatever it is that you fancy, home decorating or whatever, you could technically switch your Zoom camera off and be doing that right now. As far as I know, someone is out there listening to us talking and redecorating their house. So the flexibility, I think, is something that we value, and people do feel like, we asked this question in 2 different ways. We said, do virtual meetings provide you with more flexibility and more time? The graph was basically the same for both of those. So I think everybody does definitely feel like they have increased flexibility through this modality. And overall, what do we prefer? Do we want in person? Do we want virtual? I think this is, a big picture question in terms of how people feel. And I think this is something that's definitely going to vary over time too. I'm sure now, where right now we're all so zoomed out, I'm sure there will come a time, a year or two, however, from now, where we'll wish that we could go back to more Zoom and more PJs. But I think it is sort of an even split in terms of how people feel. I think it's just sort of something interesting to consider in terms of future planning, both for your department, faculty meetings, in-person meetings. There's obviously many things that do lend themselves still to continuing via Zoom. And as we said, there's pros and cons. So there's the loss of boundaries, which in some ways can be nice, right? Someone just told me an anecdote of how they found out I think someone fosters parrots or something, and they found this out because the person had a parrot sitting on their shoulder in the middle of Zoom. Things that you don't necessarily learn about your colleagues, right? So I think in some ways that loss of boundaries is nice. In other ways, it can certainly be a bit awkward. And the more, the more sort of small information that you gather in person, that is now all lost because you're not in the office. And so we have to sort of check in more with each other. But again, we feel more flexible. There's some other comments, sort of qualitative stuff that people mentioned in our survey, which is the reduced carbon footprint, right? Like, especially now with gas prices going sky high, not having to drive everywhere is great. It can feel maybe more equitable. So people feel like you can't just go chat in a corner with your chair and make some sort of side deal. And that's something that I know, we've talked about in terms of different people coming to different meetings and who feels like this is, I guess, provided sort of a more inclusive environment that everyone's on equal footing, right? There's no person that can sit next to the chair or whoever it is that's sort of the person that you want to sidle up to and have a side conversation with. That being said, all of those side conversations are lost, which I think in many ways is also problematic. You can't just kind of clarify something real quick with someone or make someone aware of an issue that's going on. So more international collaborations, obviously, these are sort of the little things that Zoom has really opened up. And as they were just talking about it in the AWAEM meeting, opportunities for talking much more broadly, also giving lectures and stuff. So it is, there's very obvious benefits. But I think one sort of big aspect of it, especially for women, as we mentioned, this is an AWAEM sponsored didactic, so that's sort of the next thing that we want to think about, is that because you're now at home in a situation where you might have been quote unquote stuck at home, now you can at least be part of the meeting, even if you're only half listening, at least maybe you're kind of able to catch some of it. So maybe again, that is a bit more of an equitable situation. So for that, we actually looked at the next question, which is the impact on women. And it, again, as we said, we sent this out to the CORD listserv and the AWAEM listserv. So obviously a great number of the people answering were women, but people did strongly agree or somewhat agree that the impact of all of this, these virtual meetings, has been a bigger impact on women. And so in the next slide, we're breaking it down. So basically the percentage, it was 33% of respondents were men, 65 were women. And you can see that when you actually split it up in terms of how people agree or disagree about the impact of women, that the women definitely felt quite strongly that they were very much impacted by this. Granted, it's obviously, a biased sort of a personal bias, right? Like you feel like you're more affected. We didn't obviously ask the opposite question, so there's a little bit of bias in the way that the question was worded itself. But I think there is a very strong favoring here of women feeling that they definitely felt the impact. So with that, I think let's talk a little bit about the specific challenges for women. As we said, in AWAEM sponsored didactic, we want to make sure that we kind of address that as a specific issue, since that's near and dear to at least all of our hearts.
And thank you. And I think we're probably a little bit of a female skewed audience here. And I'll just say real quickly, lots, to our male colleagues, you guys also do a wonderful job. But we are going to look at some of the challenges that are specific to women. And we were just having one of our core faculty meetings, and of course it was on Zoom. And as we were signing off, one of my female core faculty attendings was like, now that we're beginning to reintegrate, have you thought about keeping all of our core faculty meetings and potentially some of our CCC meetings virtual on Zoom? And she mentioned, I have a young child, I don't have to try to arrange childcare for a 20 or 30-minute meeting, and I really enjoy that. And it was an interesting thing for me to think about, because I actually was expecting that people would a little bit be chomping at the bit to sort of, get back to what we've been doing, get out of the house. Sometimes these meetings are pretty social for us. We all kind of, have lunch while we meet and things like that. So I actually thought this article was very timely to her bringing that up. And this was published in ASAP Now. I don't know if any of you have had the chance to read this, but it was looking at the impact of the virtual world on women, specifically focusing on virtual conferences. Are they a blessing for women? And this article was more focusing on conferences, national conferences, sort of like we're attending right now. And it was a little bit looking at sort of what was just mentioned is, yes, this is a great thing in general because we are bringing more women to the table. So if you have young children, you don't have to spend an entire day commuting. You don't have to try to arrange for childcare, but you can be there, you can be present and have a seat at the table. So in general, is this really lightening our load a little bit? So I don't want to be redundant, but you know, it's easy to pop in for maybe a 20 or 30-minute meeting without having to rearrange your entire day. Maybe you can join in that conference or that faculty meeting that, you know, when the baby is napping or something like that, or you can start prepping dinner, do one of those things. So in a lot of ways, it's really been a wonderful thing. But I think the argument can be made the other way too. Are we really adding to our burden? So now, you know, not only are you, as I believe Katja said, half listening, which is great in a way, right? You're getting involved, you do a little bit, kind of keep your ear on what's happening and get to attend some things that you wouldn't maybe be able to attend, but you're not able to really give it your clear focus. And I'm sure we've all been part of that meeting where, gosh, things I've witnessed this year on Zoom, I've witnessed entire meals being made and consumed. I've made, you know, I've witnessed kids playing, which again is great that we are having kids that can be involved in the workplace now, but it's stressful too. I've watched parents try to close doors, push kids out of the way, all of that. So as we've said, there's no real clear time off during which we're truly not accessible. And if you're always trying to do two things at once, can you complete any of these tasks to the best of your ability? And that's what I want to talk about just a little bit. I think we've all felt like that picture before, like trying to juggle 10 different things at once. So specifically, I would like to discuss a little bit the mental load of women, because Zoom and the virtual culture has happened to both our male colleagues and us as women, but has it affected women more? And what makes it more for women? And I would argue that this mental workload is part of what makes it more for women. So this is defined as the cognitive labor or emotional labor that is associated with managing a household and family. And I think this often does get skewed towards mothers, managing your children and your family, but it's certainly not limited to that. This also applies to women that are in partnerships, or maybe that have pets, or that have aging parents or other people that they're caring for. They are still managing their household in many of those occasions. So what it is, to break it down a little bit, is anticipating the needs, identifying the options for filling them, and making decisions and monitoring progress. And I like to use the laundry as the example. It's not so much doing the laundry. So maybe, you know, your children or your husband or someone physically will do the laundry. It's more everything that goes into that. So do we have laundry soap? Did anyone buy laundry detergent? Did they buy, you know, dryer sheets? And not only are we doing the laundry, but oh my goodness, you know, soccer is on Saturday. Did we wash the soccer jerseys? Did we wash the ballet uniforms, things like that? And then the laundry got done, but did it get folded and put back in everyone's correct closet? So it's that mental workload that most often falls to women. And I think that puts extra pressure on us in the virtual environment. So they did a nice study here where they looked at 393 middle-class women that were partnered. And what they found was that a majority of women reported that they alone assumed responsibility for household routines involving organizing schedules for the family and maintaining order in the home. And if you really break that down and think about it, that is an enormous amount of work and an invisible burden. So household routines, and what kind of things are we referring to there? Well, I think anyone, if you do have children, can attest to childcare, of course, is one of those things. Again, not necessarily physically caring for that child, but arranging the nanny or the daycare, arranging the schedule for the nanny, making sure the nanny gets paid, making sure you have backup childcare. And then homeschool. If anyone has had the opportunity, as I have this year, to try to encourage a 5-year-old to do Zoom kindergarten, you can attest to it is a pretty full thing for you to have to do. Oops, sorry. A pretty full thing for you to have to manage at that time. And there is not a way, at least managing a 5-year-old on kindergarten, there's definitely not a way to successfully do that and be on your own Zoom meeting that I have found yet at this time. So those are some of those schedule things. And then there's the obvious, like the doctor, the dentist, doing things like that. One more thing I just love to throw in there that I think women most often manage and sometimes don't take credit for is vacations too. You know, you schedule a vacation, you pack the suitcases, you make sure everybody is ready to go. So there's a lot of scheduling and routine that women are responsible for. And then maintaining order in the home too. So making sure everyone does get out the door in the morning, making sure everyone does get to their practices. There is a lot that goes on. And I think it's captured well in this cartoon. So you see the woman in the picture saying, "You didn't do the dishes," and their partner responding, "Well, you never asked." So that's all that invisible stuff that we're managing and sometimes forgetting to ask someone else to offload for us. So after going through that, I just like to reference slide 25 again, is the upside to Zoom actually the downside? So good news, now you have the opportunity to do all of the mental work that you would have done when you occasionally got to leave the house, but now you have to compress it into your normal daytime schedule. And also, could you do all of the work that you used to do and maybe a little bit more at the same time now? And so you kind of see this woman who is really kind of thinking about all of the stuff in the background while she's trying to do her work. Do we have toilet paper? Do we have a babysitter? So did the pandemic and the subsequent virtual environment worsen the mental workload of women in academic emergency medicine? And I did put a personal picture up just to sort of press this point home. That's he was probably 7-month-old son right there, and then my DIO on Zoom in the background. And the good news is my 7-month-old finds my DIO very soothing, and he really loves trauma conference at 7 a.m. And all early conferences. So that worked well for me. But as I'm sure people can attest, it's very frustrating when you're trying to keep your child kind of calm and not banging on the keyboard and out of the way and still be ready to turn your camera on and respond when you're called on. And so the last thing I want to touch on is exactly the opposite half of that. So the mental workload of women either went up with, potentially children being homeschooled or caring for elderly parents, and so did the workload that everyone is handling in academics. So maybe you had your schedule down and things were kind of a little bit on autopilot for you. But now didactic schedule, suddenly it's virtual with literally maybe 2 days notice. So rearranging those small groups, those simulated experiences, learning to run the Zoom platform takes a lot of time and effort. Planning your faculty development may look very different now. And I think something that all people worry about, but again, that women tend to worry about, is how do you maintain wellness and that meaningful communication with your residents? So I'm the program director at Cleveland Clinic Akron General, where I work, and trying to have a good 6-month evaluation virtually is difficult and really not the same as when you can be in the room with your resident and sort of read their body language and pick up on some of those social cues. Preserving residency milestones. Graduation was a challenge, I'm sure, for everyone last year. We ended up having a drive-up graduation, which was fun, but how do you manage holiday parties, orientation, graduation, things like that? And then one more thing to add to our work was virtual recruitment. So on one hand, you would think this would balance nicely, right? I don't have to leave my office or I don't have to leave my home. All interviews are on the computer. However, that meant we had to redo all of our social media. We had to do virtual tours and potentially film those. And then applications went up. So people did not have to travel for interviews. So now I have to read hundreds or thousands of applications, and most people increase their interview capacity too. So all of that, even though it's virtual, is your real time that you are spending on it. You had to become an IT expert. So we're on Zoom now, but Zoom, Microsoft Teams, all of that fun stuff. And then lastly, not only are so we've added at home, we've added in the workplace, and much of it being virtual on both sides. But lastly, we have to navigate the loss of normal. So you're stressed out, but you're also worried, will I bring this home to my family? Maybe grandparents were caregivers for children and they can't be any longer. And how do you keep things normal for your residents, even though they can't do the things that they used to do and they need to still find meaning in their work? So that kind of brings us to, can we do both well in the age of Zoom?
So we've talked a lot about how Zoom has affected everybody's lives. And we wanted to kind of end on some ideas of how we can do a better job of setting some boundaries for our own self-care going forward. Because let's be real, Zoom not going away anytime soon. So it is okay to set boundaries. Think about it like kind of email boundaries, right? Like there's many folks who do not answer email after 5 or 6 p.m. They have already said that they're not answering it before 8 a.m. So you should never expect a response. I personally have a disclaimer on my email. This is my disclaimer. My working hours may not be your working hours. So please do not feel obliged to respond outside your normal work schedule, because I will sometimes send emails at 2, 3, 4 in the morning when I've decided that I'm going to do paperwork for the day. I work a lot of late evenings and some overnights. And so a lot of times I do things as I have time to do them. But I certainly don't expect anybody to actually answer me at any of those times of the day. And I want them to know that I do not expect that answer. However, recently I have discovered that you can actually schedule emails in Microsoft Office. So there's a little button next to the send button, there's a little drop down menu. You can say, if it's Saturday at like 8 a.m., you can be like, you know what? Nobody needs to read this email till Monday, and schedule it to go out Monday at 8:05. If you know me, you know that there's no way I am awake at 8 in the morning on Monday morning. But everybody will think that you are so on your A game because these emails are going out first thing at the beginning of the week. Remember that leadership sets expectations, and so you can set your own boundaries, and the team is going to emulate you and what your boundaries are. It lets them know that they can also set boundaries and that you're going to honor those boundaries. Give them permission to take a day off. Give yourself permission to take a day off. If you can schedule a whole day without a Zoom meeting, do that, because everybody needs time to regroup, get it back together, get the stuff done that you can't get done while you're on Zoom. It is virtually impossible to sign all of your notes, participate in a meeting, and make sure that all the evaluations for the residents are done at the same time. So try to make sure that you have some time to get those other things that don't require Zoom done as well. Schedule some uninterrupted time for you. Not the time where you're trying to read a book and like 4 people are like poking you with things, or you're trying to maybe do something else while you're getting through a chapter. That's not in uninterrupted time. So we put the Peloton picture on here because right now on Peloton, once you start a class, you cannot pause it. You must ride it right on through uninterrupted. And if you do try to clip out while it's going, it will still go without you, and then it'll just mess up all your numbers. Just put it out there. If you're not that kind of person that cares about the numbers, I guess it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, I am super type A and the numbers matter to me. But that right there is time that I spend specifically just for my own wellness. So if you have things that help your wellness, try to make sure that you protect some time for it. Also, take your time back. If you can outsource some stuff, whatever it might be. We put the Roomba on here. If vacuuming isn't your jam, this thing will vacuum constantly without you even paying it any attention. And pets apparently really like it if you are easily entertained. There's all these videos of you on YouTube about like cats and pets like riding around on the Roomba, and it's actually really entertaining. If you can order your groceries in advance, all you have to do is pull up at the grocery store and they just put those bad boys in the back, and you can go on home without having to walk through the store. You can do home with a home chef. There's also Fresh Direct and all kinds of things where you can have stuff actually delivered to your house, kind of similar to Amazon in terms of like Amazon Prime. If you live in a real city, you can actually get stuff on Amazon in like 2 hours to your house. And mostly, prioritize what makes you well, whatever that might be. If it is skiing, if it is being at the beach, if it is reading a book, if it is knitting, if it is exercising and running marathons, bless you guys who love to do that. It's not me, but I am super excited for those of you who love that kind of thing. Make time for those things because no one else can make that time for you. So make sure you protect your time and prioritize the things that keep you, you. And some best practices: use meetings responsibly. Meetings generally don't schedule themselves. It kind of feels that way sometimes, but if you're the one controlling the meeting, put the meeting at times that you know are not going to upset your day. Also, give yourself breaks between meetings. Having back-to-back meetings all day long is not only unproductive, but it is exhausting. So try to make sure you build in a break. Keep track of your email etiquette. If you need to put a disclaimer on your email, do that. Try not to expect answers outside the normal workday. Keep your workday, whatever your workday is. We have it in here as 8 to 5. My workday is generally more like 1 to 9 or so, because I am not a morning person. But if you whatever your time is, make that your time. Block off some personal time just for yourself and to use that time to rejuvenate and get back to being you. And then ask people, but don't expect people to do things for you or to attend meetings, and make sure that they understand that. That needs to be clear. You're not just expecting them to show up, particularly if they're like on vacation. They don't expect them to come to meetings. That's their time for themselves. But if you want to ask them to do things, that's one thing, but just make sure that everybody understands that no is okay. And we will be happy to take any questions. Hopefully we've given or inspired you to try to rework your Zoom life some, so that we can all have some better wellness going into this next academic year. Because believe it or not, it's already May, guys. We're almost there.
Yeah, and obviously we are no experts, considering how somehow we ended up here at 5 p.m. Eastern time on a Zoom meeting. So
I had to go off camera to get my husband and my mom, who's visiting, out the door on time for swim lessons while we were doing this. It was a mess. I
realized we also should have had a quiz as to who is wearing pajamas or not. So
I know. I think
remark that I do also control my calendar still. It's because I don't have an assistant, but something, to be knowledgeable, keep control of your calendar so people don't sneak in and put stuff in there when you're not, or make sure you block off time for yourself.
We mentioned a few times sort of the 9 to 5 workday, and I just wanted to echo that too. That's in emergency medicine. Obviously, that's not realistic for most of us. But one thing I've noticed is I'm not good if I work a weekend clinically at blocking one of those weekdays off, because you do need a day off during the week. And I noticed that my chair is much better about it than I am. He will definitely make sure that he, blocks one of those days off for no meetings so he can get stuff done. So I encourage everybody to do that. Be healthy. Try to work your 40-hour quote unquote work week and give yourself a little grace.
It's okay to say no. I mean, sometimes I just can't because I'm in between night shifts or I'm coming off a night shift, or it's like my one day I'm not working in 8. Like I'm not doing it. So it's rare that I do that, but I do try.
I also think it's important to recognize that other people are watching what we're doing, and academic medicine is stressful, but we're also talking about recruiting more women through the pipeline of academic medicine and creating more women leaders. And if we're running around looking exhausted and never having any time for ourselves, we're not going to recruit other people to think this idea is a good one for a career. So taking care of ourselves also helps our pipeline down the road and creating more people to take over for us at some point.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you everyone for being here and coming to listen to us. So,
and thanks to whoever filled out that survey. We really appreciated that.
Yeah,
so.
that was awesome.
All right, Ellen.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.